It was a dreary, rain-soaked evening, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you feel cold all over. I sat alone in my dimly lit apartment, the sound of raindrops tapping against the window matching the rhythm of my anxious heart. The living room was sparse, cluttered with the remnants of a life that felt like it was falling apart. The bills lay scattered across the coffee table, unpaid and growing more urgent by the day. The weight of my financial troubles had become unbearable. Every waking moment was consumed by a gnawing sense of dread, a constant reminder that I was on the brink of disaster. I had always been good at hiding it, putting on a brave face, pretending everything was fine, but inside, I was crumbling. For years, I had been living paycheck to paycheck, just one unexpected expense away from ruin. My credit card debt was spiraling out of control. My savings account was a joke, and my dreams of financial stability were slipping through my fingers like sand. I was trapped in a vicious cycle, unable to break free. That night, as I stared blankly at the bills, I felt a crushing sense of hopelessness. I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, and mentally. I had tried everything: budgeting, cutting expenses, working overtime. But no matter what I did, it seemed like I was always 2 steps behind, always struggling to keep my head above water. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm the rising tide of panic. But all I could see was a future where I lost everything: my home, my dignity, my sense of self-worth. I couldn't let that happen, but I didn't know what else to do. I was out of options, out of ideas, out of hope. It was in that moment of despair that I made a decision. I was tired of feeling like a victim, tired of letting my circumstances dictate my life. Something had to change, and it had to change now. I didn't know how or what, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I had to find a way out, no matter what it took. The next day, I dragged myself to work, my mind still clouded by the previous night's turmoil. I worked as an administrative assistant in a small, nondescript office, a job that was as unfulfilling as it was underpaid. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the monotony of my tasks only deepened my sense of disillusionment. At lunchtime, I took refuge in a nearby park, seeking solace in the fresh air and the rustling of leaves. As I sat on a bench, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, I overheard a conversation between 2 men sitting on the bench next to mine. "Did you hear about Mark? He's completely turned his life around, paid off all his debt, bought a house, even started investing," one of the men said, his voice tinged with admiration. "Yeah, it's incredible. And to think it all started with that one habit," the other man replied. I wasn't usually one to eavesdrop, but something about their conversation caught my attention. I listened intently, my curiosity piqued. "What was the habit?" the first man asked. "Journaling," the other man said simply. I almost laughed out loud. Journaling? How could something so mundane, so ordinary, have such a profound impact? I had heard of journaling before, of course. Writing down your thoughts, setting goals, reflecting on your day. It seemed like the kind of thing people did when they had time to spare, not when they were struggling to make ends meet. But the more I thought about it, the more intrigued I became. Could it really be that simple? Could something as straightforward as writing in a journal be the key to transforming my life? I had nothing to lose, so I decided to give it a try. That evening, I dug out an old notebook that had been collecting dust on my bookshelf and opened it to a blank page. I felt foolish at first, unsure of what to write, but I forced myself to start. At first, the words came slowly, awkwardly. I wrote about my day, my frustrations, my fears. I wrote about my financial struggles, laying bare the full extent of my debt and my anxiety. I wrote about my dreams that had been buried for so long under the weight of my circumstances that they felt distant, almost unreachable. But as I wrote, something began to shift. The act of putting my thoughts on paper forced me to confront the reality of my situation in a way I hadn't before. It was like holding up a mirror to my life, seeing it for what it truly was. Not just a series of random events, but a story that I had the power to rewrite. In the weeks that followed, journaling became a daily ritual. Every morning, before the chaos of the day could take hold, I would sit down with my notebook and write. I wrote about my goals, my fears, my triumphs, and my setbacks. I wrote about the kind of life I wanted to live and the person I wanted to become. At first, it felt like a small, insignificant act. just a few minutes of writing each day. But gradually, I began to notice a change. The more I wrote, the more clarity I gained. The fog of uncertainty that had clouded my mind for so long started to lift, and I began to see my situation with new eyes. Journaling helped me identify the patterns that had been keeping me stuck, the impulsive spending, the avoidance of financial responsibilities, the self-sabotaging behaviors that had become second nature. It was like shining a light into the darkest corners of my mind, revealing the hidden fears and beliefs that had been driving my decisions. But more than that, journaling gave me a sense of control. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in the driver's seat of my life. I wasn't just reacting to my circumstances. I was actively shaping them. I set small, achievable goals, paying off one credit card, saving a certain amount each month, cutting back on unnecessary expenses, and tracked my progress in my journal. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the weight of my financial troubles seemed too heavy to bear. But I kept writing, kept pushing forward, and slowly but surely the tide began to turn. One day, about 3 months into my journaling practice, I had a breakthrough. I was reviewing my budget, something I now did regularly, thanks to my newfound discipline, when I realized that I had managed to save enough money to pay off one of my smaller credit cards in full. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. For the first time in years, I was taking a step forward instead of just treading water. I couldn't believe it. I had actually made progress. I wrote about the experience in my journal that night, capturing the mix of emotions I felt: relief, pride, disbelief. I realized that this wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my power. I had been so caught up in my financial struggles that I had forgotten what it felt like to be in control of my life. That first breakthrough gave me the momentum I needed to keep going. I started to set more ambitious goals, paying off my larger debts, building an emergency fund, even starting to invest. And as I worked towards those goals, I continued to use my journal as a tool for reflection and accountability. Every time I hit a setback, an unexpected expense, a dip in my savings, I would turn to my journal. I would write about my frustration, my doubts, my fears. But I would also write about my determination to keep moving forward, to find a way around the obstacles in my path. And somehow, every time I did, journaling became my anchor, the habit that kept me grounded and focused on my goals, even when the storm raged around me. As the months turned into years, the habit of journaling continued to transform my life in ways I never could have imagined. What had started as a simple exercise in self-reflection had become a powerful tool for personal growth and financial transformation. I paid off all my credit card debt, something I had once thought impossible. I built an emergency fund that gave me a sense of security I had never known before. I started investing, cautiously at first, but with growing confidence as I learned more and saw my investments begin to grow. But the changes didn't stop there. Journaling had a ripple effect, extending far beyond my finances. It helped me improve my relationships as I became more aware of my own emotions and more intentional in how I communicated with others. It helped me in my career as I set clear goals and developed the discipline to achieve them. And perhaps most importantly, journaling helped me reconnect with my dreams. The dreams that had once seemed so distant, traveling the world, starting my own business, living a life of freedom and abundance, began to feel possible again. I realized that the life I had been living, the life of financial struggle and scarcity, was not the life I was meant to live. I had the power to create something different, something better, and journaling was the habit that had given me the clarity, the discipline, and the confidence to do it. One day, as I was flipping through my old journals, I came across an entry from the early days of my journey. It was filled with the raw, unfiltered emotions of someone who was lost and desperate, someone who didn't believe in their own ability to change. As I read those words, I was struck by how far I had come. I decided to do something bold, something that the old me would never have dared to do. I decided to share my story. I started a blog chronicling my journey from financial despair to stability. I wrote about the challenges I had faced, the lessons I had learned, and the habit of journaling that had been the catalyst for my transformation. I didn't know if anyone would read it, but that wasn't the point. I wanted to document my journey, to hold myself accountable, and to inspire others who might be struggling like I once had. To my surprise, the blog took off. People from all over the world started reading my posts, leaving comments and sharing their own stories. It was humbling and inspiring to see how many others were facing the same challenges I had faced, and how much they resonated with my journey. As the blog grew, so did the opportunities that came with it. I was invited to speak at financial literacy workshops, to contribute to online publications, and even to write a book. The man who had once been drowning in debt was now being sought after for her advice on wealth building and financial empowerment. Years passed, and the habit of journaling remained a constant in my life. It had become more than just a tool for financial transformation. It was a way of living, a way of staying connected to my goals, my values, and my dreams. I had achieved things I never thought possible: financial independence, a successful career, and a sense of purpose that went far beyond the numbers in my bank account. But perhaps the greatest reward was the realization that I had the power to change my life, not just once, but over and over again. Every time I faced a new challenge, whether it was a financial setback, a career transition, or a personal crisis, I turned to my journal. I wrote about my fears, my hopes, and my plans, and every time I found a way through. Looking back, it's clear that the habit of journaling did more than just transform my wealth journey. It transformed me. It gave me the clarity to see the path ahead, the discipline to stay the course, and the confidence to believe in my own ability to create the life I wanted. And it all started with a simple decision, made in a moment of despair, to pick up a pen and start writing. That one habit, journaling, turned out to be the key to unlocking the life I had always dreamed of. It taught me that no matter how dark things might seem, there is always a way forward. And it reminded me every day that I am the author of my own story.